Esports sucks, and it has done great harm to the FGC. And I'm talking about all of it, from 2D to indie, and everything in between, even poverty games. But as I say this, I recognize the influence of esports isn't all bad, and that some of it has actually helped push the FGC in the direction that it honestly should go. I have been meaning to make a video on this for years now, even before I posted my first few videos. I just couldn't put it into words. I could have just said, I hate esports, but that helps no one, not even myself. I had to take time and think why, and try to figure out a way to help the community that I love. For years now, I have worked in the industry, asked people their thoughts, and seen firsthand the effects. And I think I have finally come to a conclusion. I think it's time to truly look at the FGC's relationship with esports. It's time for this esports FGC dream to die, and a new, better dream to be created. So come with me to help solve this problem. I bet you have a few questions in your head right now. What makes the FGC not esports? How could esports harm the FGC? How did esports harm the FGC? What even is esports and the FGC? Well, I think all these questions can be best explained with an analogy. Esports is to FIFA as grassroots is to pro wrestling. I'm going to come back to this analogy a few times, but to sum it up, there are two big mindsets when it comes to competitive video gaming. Esports, which means that the publisher or an overarching group sets the rules of the game, and grassroots, where the people set the rules. League of Legends would be the poster child of the esports mindset, arguably being the game that shows all of the strengths and weaknesses of esports. While on the other side, we have the FGC, the fighting game community. So now that we know the two mindsets, how did the FGC get hurt by esports? What happened? Two words: esports indie. If you look at the strengths of esports, you can easily see that it is far superior to grassroots. Esports has the money, the fame, and the respect that everyone in the gaming sphere wants. Grassroots can't give that, or at least to that amount. And it's all thanks to centralization. You see, going back to the analogy, FIFA is an international league for soccer and runs the World Cup. FIFA controls everything about the league, including its promotion, advertising, rules, regulations, pay-or-play, franchising, anything you can think of. Events are run and built by FIFA, players are promoted by FIFA, sponsors are brought in by FIFA. And because of this centralization, FIFA could better leverage itself to bargain for more money. Because at the end of the day, if you want to work with the World Cup, you talk to FIFA. They hold all the cards. Esports works the same way, but with even more control. Because unlike FIFA, who can't own the game of soccer, big game publisher can. Better yet, they can change the game so it can make as much money as possible by design through microtransactions. It's thanks to these microtransactions that esports has so much money to burn when it comes to their events. Add to that sponsors and franchise fees, and the deep pool of resources is made even deeper, allowing them to host the best events money can buy. Everything top of the line. It's no secret that esports can put on the best of shows. And why wouldn't they? The better the show, the more people think the game is cool, which means the more people that go to play their often free-to-play game, and boost the game's player numbers, as well as get people to buy into their microtransactions, both putting more money into the publisher's hand than what they would have spent in the first place, directly and indirectly. It's a pretty good cycle once you get it running. All the publisher has to do is keep the hype going with bigger and better events. And publishers make sure that everyone gets paid boatloads of money in order to make that happen. And I mean, why not? They're only going to make their money back anyway. So why not make sure everybody involved is happy? Well, save for the teams that has to pay for franchise fees and require pay or play. But who cares about that? The players are able to live the dream of making a living playing video games, while also being micro celebrities. And the same goes for the cast and crew. Grassroots can't do that. And so the FGC has to stand there and wonder, why can't we have that? And jealousy and resentment grows with each new deal, with each new huge event. Why can't pro fighting game players live the high life of playing games for a living? Why can't we have stadiums packed with people with live performances and custom media? Why can't our pro players be as popular as theirs? Why can't our games just be as popular? Why can't we be esports? I am pretty sure y'all have a bunch of answers to that question, but before we dig into that topic, I would like to introduce you to a marketing term called first mover advantage. This basically means that the first person to move into a space, into an industry, is normally the one to take it over. You tend to see that in pretty much every industry. But when it comes to the story of competitive gaming, something weird happened. When you think early esports, what do you think? Doom? Quake? StarCraft? Counter-Strike? Warcraft? Well, here's the thing. All of those are wrong. Because if you're willing to ignore score or time attack competitions of yesteryear, you have Street Fighter 2 coming out years before any of those games. Heck, even Battle by the Bay, fighting game's first international tournament, would have its first year in 1996. It's safe to say that fighting games was the first mover in the competitive gaming space, at least when it comes to direct player versus player games. With that, the FGC's spot at the top of competitive gaming should be confirmed. So what happened? While I do admit this is the part of the video where I criticize the FGC, but to be honest, this is actually a really hard question to answer. But I came up with two big reasons. Fighting games' unique problem with casuals, and the flaws of grassroots. Starting with casuals, I'm going to dispel this right now. Fighting games are no harder than any other genre. They are all extremely hard to get to the top, and I would call you a bold-faced liar if you would tell me that learning Street Fighter is much more difficult than learning Valorant. So I have to ask, what's the difference? Why do these games have so much more casual players than fighting games? The answer is actually quite simple, the social aspect. Most esports games are team games, when you are playing with more than one person in order to beat the other team. Sounds simple, right? But when it comes to competitive games, no game will ever have a good enough tutorial to carry you to the point of competitive competency. Meaning, in order for you to get good at a game, or at least get to a level of understanding where you can learn from your mistakes, you have to go elsewhere in order to climb the ladder. This is a very hard thing to do, and having a team makes things a far easier pill to swallow, because your team can either carry you, teach you, or take the blame for failings, both theirs and yours. In fighting games and other 1v1 games like RTSs, you are going to have to carry that weight and get beaten over and over and over again until you learn what you need to do next, only to hit the next wall. While for sure this isn't a bad thing, this isn't an attractive thing either, at least in the eyes of the average casual player. So no matter what, they get filtered out pretty quickly. I wish I can come up with a solution to this, but it's pretty much an unsolvable problem due to the nature of 1v1 games. So something is needed to try to cover up as much as possible. Games like Smash add free-for-all modes and general casual appeal to get around this issue. Sports games, well, they are massively popular because they piggyback off the fame of normal sports. And RTS games have expansive story modes to keep people coming back. This issue is compounded by the grassroots mindset. And to tell you why, let's bring back the analogy. Grassroots is like pro wrestling. While most sports have a centralized organization to look after everything, pro wrestling is all about decentralization. If you don't know, pro wrestling is more than just WWE and AEW. There are actually many groups all around the world with different rule sets, styles, sizes, and some are actually real wrestling. It's very individualistic. No two are alike, and anyone can make their own promotion on the spot. While I would say that this is a good thing, as it breeds more ideas and creative thinking as each group tries to outdo each other in order to gain popularity. It also has one big weakness: brand power. Brand building is very difficult on its own, but with Grassroots, it's made even more difficult due to its openness and the fact that most people don't even know that they have to build a brand in the first place. So everyone is competing and following what works. Again, this on its own isn't a bad thing. It breeds ideas and creative thinking. At least it should. When it comes to the FGC, it's kind of a blind leading the blind type deal. And a lot of people just copy and paste stuff, kind of sacrificing the creative part of things. But hey, everyone's having fun. The problem is when it comes to the FGC, the lack of brand power affects everyone, from tournament organizers to pro players, as everyone pretty much has to work on building their own brand. And very few brands are big enough to attract a casual fan base, which leads to everyone's reach being mostly insular. Again, this isn't a bad thing. You keep your core happy, you keep the whole FGC running for a long time. But when it comes to gaining resources and sponsor support, yeah, you kinda need that. Growth is expensive in the gaming space, and unlike esports, Grassroots doesn't have money to burn. So at this point, I'm pretty sure you asked, with how good esports is and the glaring issues that Grassroots has, why not change the FGC to be more esports? Well, here's the thing, and pretty much the reason I said that esports has harmed the FGC. There has been many attempts. The esports mindset has tried to push its way to the FGC with freemium game models, leagues, and attempts at centralization, all to various amounts of success and failures. But the issue is, in the attempt to make the FGC more esports, there was a push against the FGC's more grassroots nature, trying to get rid of what makes the FGC, and the powers that Grassroots gives it. It's almost like a poison, and the worst part is, esports doesn't even work. So, would you believe me if I told you that esports has a fundamental flaw? Despite all the success that esports has had over the years and all the money it has given out, that esports as an industry is doomed unless it can keep feeding money down its black hole of a core, or maybe reorganize itself into a more grassroots mindset. Well, you don't have to believe me, because the fundamental flaw of esports is that it's not self-sustaining. And the reason can be boiled down to 2 points: the lack of game preservation and Overwatch. I know what you're thinking. Overwatch? How so? Well, just wait a bit. I'm actually not picking low-hanging fruit here. But let's start with the lack of game preservation. Most esports games work off of 2 models. The freemium model, where the game is free and they get their money through microtransactions, or the standard model, where you have to buy the game, but the game is pretty much made to be multiplayer only, just like MMOs. As fun as they may be, these games are fundamentally doomed games. Once the amount of money the game makes becomes less than the amount of money to upkeep the game is put on life support and then it dies. So the object of the game is to farm as much money and players as possible to keep itself alive, and not go down that downward spiral that is player decay. The natural occurrence when players stop playing the game over time for any reason, such as losing too much, the game is not as hype as it used to be, or pretty much anything else. Competitive games get hit with player decay even harder than, say, MMOs who use the same model. So it's quite the tightrope. And my, oh my, do publishers pull out all the stops to slow player decay. Promotions, battle passes, crossovers, limited time options, meaningless progression systems. But I think the one strategy that is most sinister is the game patch. Patches are one of the great wonders of gaming. Free, mandatory DLC that make the game better, with bug fixes, graphical updates, and system tweaks. But in the hands of esports, it became a tool to keep the game new. And when I say new, I mean if you stopped playing League for 2 years, when you come back, you are going to be playing a whole new game with similar mechanics. It would be a different story if these changes were done to help the game. By all means, I'm not saying it doesn't, but for the most part, a lot of it seems to be random. And just think what it does to the players. Players are no longer able to see the game for what it is, but what it could be. Players, all with different visions for the game, start tying their happiness to the version of the game that best fits their vision. You see it all the time. This character needs buffs. This character needs nerfs. I would only play if this character is made better. I will only play if this character is nerfed to the ground. Thoughts like these harm the preservation of the game, because once the game gets no more updates, you are forced to see the game for what it is. And instead of working with it and changing the perception of it for the better, players tend to abandon the game for something new. So you have to ask, what makes this so different from fighting games? Well, putting the whole patch thing aside, which, if you ask me, is one of the bad things that came from the influence of esports, it's quite simple really. Fighting games can also be party games. Thanks to its offline mode, you can at any time take your console and go to your friend's house and play the game. Older competitive games have dedicated server software and LAN modes, so at any time, even into the far off future, you can still set up anywhere as long as you can find people to play it. And with old games, what you see is what you get, and no one's going to change it. The publishers don't have a reason to care about it anymore. Speaking about publishers, let's talk about how Overwatch made this problem even worse. To start the story off, you have to look at the hero of gaming, the one man who stopped esports from its doomed timeline, Jeff Kaplan, the lead director of Overwatch. On that fateful day in 2016, Blizzard executives came to Jeff Kaplan and asked him to make Overwatch esports. With his powers of foresight, he looked into each timeline to see the fate of esports and said, "It's dangerous to be overly committed to esports too early in the lifespan of the game." And after hearing that, they gave up and waited. At least, that's in the healthier esports timeline. We live in the doomed timeline, where the executives went over Jeff's head and created the OWL, the Overwatch League. The OWL will introduce sports franchising to esports. If you have ever seen the NFL or NBA, it pretty much works like that. No, actually, Overwatch copied and pasted the model. For those who don't know, it basically goes like this. Teams pay outrageously large sums of money in order to get into their major league series, in hopes of winning the prize money and getting their money back through things like ticket sales, merch sales, and other deals, which they get a percentage of. For OWL, their franchise dues were $20 million and required player pay. That's a lot of money, and teams cannot pay this. So they did the only thing they could do, which in hindsight was the stupidest option. Borrow money from venture capitalists, people with a lot of money who invest into things in hopes they would get their money back with interest. Esports was getting hyped up at the time, so it was pretty easy to get the money. But it got worse. League of Legends saw what was happening and decided it was their turn with the LCS, requiring $10 million plus player play as their franchise dues. Then more games joined in on the gold mine. This wouldn't be that bad as long as teams made enough money from merch and ticket sales with the help of sponsor ads. But they didn't. This level of growth was unsustainable. You are not going to pack arena seats with people wanting to watch esports events. Well, save for Worlds, but that's different. So because of all that, while esports may look all bright and shiny on its surface, it's a ticking time bomb. Once VCs cut off teams from their money, teams are going to fall off one by one. And these publishers are not willing to take the hit to their bottom line to take on payer play to relieve some of the stress. Also, for that same reason, scaling back isn't an option either. The more you look at it, esports is a very fragile thing. Unless something major happens, it cannot last. So going back, I mentioned when you really looked at it, the FGC should be at the top of the food chain. and that it was hard to answer why it wasn't. Well, to understand why I said that, I want you to ask yourself, what makes a good esport? It should be cool to watch. It should be easy to understand at first glance. It should have a strong community, so there are people to talk to and play with. And the game should be fair. Not balanced, but fair. Everyone should be able to play the same game, but differently. When you look at this list, fighting games pass with flying colors, for the most part, to the point where fighting games are straight up better than most esports games. I mean, have you seen a League or Overwatch game? It's impossible to have all the information that you need to understand what is happening on the screen at one time, and still have it look good. But for fighting games, everything is right there. And the same can be said about everything else on this list. I think the magic of the FGC can be boiled down into a few points. Its storytelling, its ability to keep any game alive, its ability to keep people together, and the unique respect that is given to fighting game players and the FGC. It's these that I like to call the superpowers of the FGC. It's no secret that the FGC gets compared a lot to pro wrestling. A lot of fighting game fans are also wrestling fans. And, well, we also have a major tournament themed around wrestling. Why is that? Well, when you get down to it, the storytelling is the same. No, I'm not talking about kayfabe. I'm talking about the real version of it. In a space where everyone has to tell their own story. How these stories clash and work with each other create very dynamic stories that you cannot get anywhere else. People train for hours on end in order to get to the prize at the end of the big tournament. And the emotions that come from that, from so many different people, can be felt and brings onlookers in as they watch these stories unfold. It's beautiful. And honestly, one of the best parts of the FGC. The FGC has an attitude to it that is so raw. You can't help but relate to what's happening. Every pop-off, every rivalry, every silly moment. It's impossible to recreate that. And everyone who says the FGC attitude needs to be suppressed in order to get more money is a fool. The FGC attitude and storylines is what brings people in. Up next, let's talk about the FGC's ability to keep games alive. Even the old ones. Sure, you also see it a lot in something like card games with legacy formats. But in gaming, you don't see communities wholesale reject a new game or patch too often. You don't go to an event and are told that you have to play on these arcade machines that are actually modified to work with your own controller or fight stick if you don't want to use the arcade cabinets, buttons, and joystick. You don't see support for 10-year-old games, but in the FGC, it's commonplace. To the point where, if you go to majors, sometimes it feels like you're going to a video game museum at times. And if you think that only retro games get support, just look at all the random games that become FGC darlings. Random games that would have never gotten eyes on it if it wasn't for the FGC. But that's the power of the FGC. It really just brings people together, no matter the game. And I mean it. It really brings people together. To say that the FGC is an international community is actually an understatement. You will find people from all over the world that bond with each other over fighting games. I wish I could say more here, but it's pretty straightforward. Anyone and everyone can play fighting games. And because of that, anyone and everyone shows up to play. Now, the last one is going to take a little bit to explain. Every so often, you see a big streamer with a huge following take interest in watching a fighting game. Now, if you don't know anything about streaming or content creation in general, when you get big enough, you're kind of pigeonholed into the type of content you're known for. And if you go away from it, you get punished with the disinterest of your viewers because they came for X, not Y. Like if a Smash Pro decided they didn't want to play Smash that day, the stream would take a hit. But here's the thing with fighting games. They do not give you that off-topic debuff. The viewers of that big streamer will just watch fighting games. Two of the biggest, most recent occurrence of this was when a French streamer, Kermit Zero, just wanted to watch a Smash tournament that day. And on that day, he was the biggest stream for Smash Ultimate for days on end until the last Smash Summit happened. The other time was Crazy Raccoon Cup 5, where a bunch of VTubers and their fighting game mentors played in the Japanese online invitational tournament. This event has given Street Fighter 6 viewership numbers unheard of in the fighting game space, to the point where if you combine all the streams from the players who played in the tournament and the main stream itself, I don't think EVO is going to meet those numbers. It's quite shocking actually. People have a respect for fighting games, and because of that respect, people are willing to watch it. And you can't really blame them. It's like I said earlier, fighting games are extremely watchable. At this point, I believe I explained the pros and the cons of esports and the FGC, and the weird place that the FGC holds when it comes to competitive gaming. It underperforms when it comes to popularity. So the question comes up, how can fighting games become as popular as your typical esports game? With all of the FGC superpowers, what is needed for fighting games to pop off? In short, what does the FGC need? What is keeping the FGC from reaching that next level of fame and support? To get to the dream of people just being able to live off of the games they love. Before I answer, I'm going to preface this now. These are probably going to be the hottest takes I'm ever going to make, but you'll be surprised that some of these takes are actually kinda old. But here goes. I kinda hinted at it before, but I think it's safe to say that what plagues the FGC isn't an accessibility problem, but a marketing problem. The FGC has enough people playing in tournaments, and naturally, it keeps growing every year. At this point, we need to focus less on getting people to become competitive players, and more on getting people to watch and become fans of these games and players. Understand that I am not saying that we do some elitist garbage, like you must be ranked this high to enter a tournament, because people that think like that are honestly fools. Fighting game brackets should be open to everyone and anyone who wants to play. But what I am saying is that we should focus on making fighting games more entertaining towards non-core fighting game fans and non-fans alike. Spectators, fans of certain characters, casual fans, fans of FGC content creators, people who have the slightest interest in what's going on. These are the people that we need. These are the people who watch event streams, watch player streams, watch fighting game YouTube videos, make fan art, go to events just to watch and interact with people. These are the people that make the FGC better just by being there. If you are one of these people, on the behalf of the FGC, I would like to thank you for your support. And I'm super grateful that you actually watched my video so far. And that pretty much goes for everyone else watching this video too. If you liked the video so far, go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the channel. But don't hit up the comments just yet. That comes a little bit later. Keep watching. The amount of money spent to promote top esports games is astronomical. You can go to the grocery store or gas station and probably find an advertisement for League, Overwatch, or Call of Duty. It's that widespread. Fighting games don't really get that type of advertising budget. Okay, maybe Street Fighter, Tekken, and MK could. But for the most part, advertisement is kind of left to us. Sure, publishers can push the FGC a bit, but it's up to us to show the people our world in hopes that they will stick around and become fans. Unfortunately, FGC media kinda sucks. I realize and accept that I am pointing the finger at myself here, but even at the top level, I wouldn't recommend any of this stuff. There are a few exceptions, like we could all agree that Corey videos are at another level, and that series like Assist Me and Excellent Adventures were legendary. But look at the landscape now. Boring, cookie cutter content, and boring streams. Sure, they get a lot of views, but these videos are not the kind to stick in your brain. Not the kind to have you coming back over and over, building a brand. And don't even get me started on FGC streams. There isn't any creativity going around here. Again, by all means, it works. And technically, this era has brought out the most FGC content there has ever been. But when it comes to quality, when you look at how low the bar is, it's kinda sad. I often look at top player streams and think, what would these viewer numbers look like if they weren't a top player? Even my favorite players at best are 1K Andes, which yes, 1K average views is impressive, but in the content game, that's nothing. I'm sounding like a massive hater right now, and I get that top players want to do nothing but play the game. But my point is that FGC media needs to up its game, up its quality, up its entertainment factor, up its creativeness, up everything in order to cater to casuals better. But now that I think about it, I think cater is the wrong word here, because we shouldn't stop aiming the content towards ourselves, but we should expand our scope more. For example, I don't really care for speedrunning that much. Sure, I think optimal high-speed movement type runs are cool, but if you gave me a free ticket to GDQ, I would decline. But a summoning salt video will have me watching a video about a game I do not care about. It's the same with Internet Historian. Internet Historian will have me watch a 1-hour video telling me a story about a guy trapped in a hole. This is the kind of intrigue that FGC media should aim for. I used this image before in this video, but I really want you to look at it. It tells a lot. It's honestly sad that publishers have to go to creators outside the FGC for help with their reach, because our sphere of influence is so small. And I think the crazy part about this, Sejim talked about this around 4 years ago. Tournament streams at majors pick up the slack a little bit, but outside of top 8 most of the time, they too miss the mark, leaning into the same problems. And don't get me started about online tournament streams. The FGC has some of the greatest storylines in competitive gaming, but once we learn how to optimize how we tell these stories, I truly believe that the FGC would explode in popularity. Esports will have you think that this problem could be easily solved by throwing large amounts of money at it. But looking back on how much stupid money got burned trying to make fighting games esports, let alone the whole game of Street Fighter V, I think this path doesn't work. At the end of the day, I think we went the wrong way. We as a community never explored how far grassroots can grow and evolve. I'm not saying that we need to reject modernity and embrace tradition, but what I am saying is that esports was a bad route to take, and we need to walk back a little bit and create a new one far stronger than esports. And I think esports has shown us how far competitive gaming can go. Even with the influence that it had on FGC, we still made it on TV. We still got huge pop bonuses. The community is going to long for that high again, and we both got warning and direction towards the future. If you don't believe there's a different path, just take a look at Valve games like Dota 2, Counter-Strike, and Team Fortress 2. All games with both publisher and community backing. The path is there. Grassroots can grow bigger. We just have to see where it takes us. I thought a lot about how it would end this, and it's hard to put into words, but I'll try. At its core, the FGC is strong, stronger than any other community in gaming, and it doesn't need any radical change to get it to the next level. I'm glad all it took was esports to start burning to see what was really going on and change our ways back. Well, kinda. But have no doubt in your mind, as esports burns, and we should let it, the FGC will forever endure any situation, and in time, we will get to that next level, and the brighter future that's ahead of us. Until then, I hope you liked the video, and comment what you think the FGC needs, or other thoughts. The C in FGC stands for community, and it will always be a community effort after all. So have a good one, everyone, and remember, FGC for life.